Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on Bioinputs, hosted by SHAFFE, the Southern Hemisphere Association of Fresh Fruit Exports. Today we're exploring bioinputs, the very exciting and rapidly evolving sector that is reshaping the future of sustainable agriculture. Bioinputs obviously includes your biofertilizers as well as your biological pesticides, and they are gaining traction as viable alternatives to synthetic agrochemicals. Your moderating team today consists of myself, Albert Coetzee from the CGA in South Africa, the Citrus Growers Association, as well as Nitasha Baijnath-Pillay from Hortgro. She is the Resource Management and Sustainability Manager at Hortgro, and they are the South African Deciduous Industry Association. Both the CGA and Hortgro are members of Fruit SA, which is a member of SHAFFE, and we are very fortunate to have these sessions today and to play our part by moderating. Why are we here today? The biofertilizer industry is experiencing significant growth, with the global market valued at around $2.5 billion in 2024, and that is projected to increase to $6.4 billion by 2032, growing at an annual growth rate of around 12%. This surge is driven by the increasing demand from the consumer for more sustainable agricultural practices, as well as increasing costs of synthetic fertilizers. Similarly, the biological pesticide market is expanding rapidly, valued at $8.7 billion in 2024, and they are expected to grow to $28.6 billion by 2032. That is a growth rate of around 16%.
Does anybody else want to get bought up?
The push for eco-friendly pest management solutions, regulatory support, and rising consumer awareness of food safety are key factors fueling this growth. Despite these promising trends, the adoption of the usage of bioinputs face several barriers, such as limited awareness and education among farmers regarding their benefits and application techniques, concerns about the efficacy and consistency, as these biological solutions often work differently from your traditional synthetic alternatives, and regulatory hurdles and the need for standardized production practices to ensure quality and safety. Higher initial costs compared to conventional agrochemicals, which can deter small-scale farmers, also play a big role in the perception around agri-biological inputs. To help us explore the barriers to adoption, we have a very esteemed group of speakers with us today who will discuss the entire process influencing the uptake of bioinputs in agriculture. Hendrik Pohl, a South African expert on soil health, will guide us through the practical aspects of bioinputs and production practices. Next, we will delve into the regulatory landscape with insights from Jesica Monzon from the Food and Agricultural Organization, Fabio Carlos Pavid from Biotrop in Brazil, and Debbie Mateucci from SABU in South Africa, who will address the regulatory challenges and solutions in their respective countries. Finally, Therese Gohin from the International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association, IBMA, will provide insights on the regulatory frameworks in the European Union and their implications for exporters. Before jumping into their knowledge, I will hand over to my colleague Nitasha to go through a few of our housekeeping items.
Thank you so much, Albert. Just a few housekeeping issues. As you would have noticed, the meeting is being recorded, and by you being on the platform, you are consenting to it being recorded. We will therefore upload the recording on our platforms for additional viewing and further awareness raising and outreach. Kindly keep your microphones muted. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the webinar, or towards the end of the webinar. Please do feel free to use the chat to comment, ask questions, and we'll get to that at the end of the session. Thanks.
Thank you, Nitasha. Our first speaker is Hendrik Pohl. Hendrik is an experienced horticulturist from Ceres in South Africa. He serves as a consultant where he champions soil health, biodiversity, and regen agriculture. His philosophy revolves around setting clear goals, working systematically, and maintaining balance in farming operations. Hendrik has played a pivotal role in initiatives like the Orchard of the Future project in South Africa, which explores innovative approaches to fruit cultivation. With a commitment to sustainability, Hendrik strives to leave agricultural resources in better condition for future generations while making sure that economic viability and social responsibility remains at the forefront in the industry. His expertise and forward-thinking approach continues to shape the future of fruit farming in South Africa. Hendrik, the floor is yours. Thank you for your willingness to share your insights.
Thank you very much, Albert. Good afternoon or good morning to everybody attending the webinar. I will share some insight on organic and biological inputs that are being made in the South African palm fruit industry. Mulches to cover the soil are most commonly used in the industry. Straw and wood chip are used to cover the irrigated area under the trees. Advantages to cover soil is to protect the soil, improve soil water and temperature regulation, suppress weeds, and make a contribution to soil organic matter as well as carbon percentage of the soil, serving as a food source and shelter for soil biology. It will supply nutrients to the crop in the longer term as well. Compost teas and organic extracts can be used but are not commonly used or frequently used. It's an effective way to inoculate newly organic converted systems with effective microbiology. Applied exotic biology refers to products aimed at specific pests or diseases, and it will include products containing species like viruses, trichodermas, Bavaria bassiana, and a lot more that we cannot mention. These products are effective and survive only for a short period of time after it's been applied. It is often used as part of the chemical plant protection strategy where residues needs to be managed close to harvest. Poor producing orchards are treated with compost as an addition to standard practices to improve soil quality and production. In isolated cases, it is used on whole production systems as the backbone of plant nutrient resources. Typically applied at rates of about 20 cubic meters per hectare and covered with a mulch to protect it against moisture loss and UV inputs. Compost quality is very important and the key to success where producers are reliant on compost for plant nutrients. Nutrient as well as microbial content ratios needs to be managed within the compost making process to ensure its efficiency. Living mulches, or more commonly referred to as cover crops, are being planted more in the industry, very often in the working rows and in some cases under the trees. Cover crops will not only supply organic matter on the soil surface like a traditional mulch, but will also make a contribution in the soil profile with living roots and root exudates. Plant species are carefully selected for intended beneficial inputs into the orchard ecology to replace mulches and serve to create plant and insect biodiversity. Cover crops can contribute up to 60 kg of nitrogen per hectare per year, as an example to the nutrient contribution it can supply. Flower diversity will stimulate bee activity in the orchard, providing fruit, flower visitations of bees and other pollinators, and therefore improving pollination. Plant biodiversity improves the habitat for beneficial insects, adding to biological control of insect pests. Soil health benefits include increased fungal and microbial diversity in the root zone. This will improve nutrient cycles and therefore allow more effective plant nutrient uptake of the crop. Plant nutrient cycles are of equal importance in organic as well as inorganic fertilization systems. Improved soil aggregation and aeration, allowing for healthier plant root development, effective control of nematode and woolly apple aphid populations on the roots of especially apple trees, providing weed suppression and species shift under the trees, mitigating herbicide dependency. Studies are underway to understand the impact of bioinputs on soil-borne diseases such as specific apple replant disease and Rosalenia necatrix, correlated to the higher carbon content and activated soil microbiome. In closing, bioinputs is to feed soil with mulches, teas, and extracts to support microbial life. Biodiversity are stimulated with compost and living mulches to promote beneficial organisms in the ecosystem and reduce chemical reliance. Soil health enhances ecosystem resilience, control pests and disease, and to sustain fertility. Practical solutions are supported by trusting the natural equilibrium, observing species succession, and to embrace the biodiversity ecosystem approach where everything is connected, including soil, plants, organisms, and the human experience. Patience, trust, and observation leads to sustainable and thriving agricultural systems. Thank you for your time to listen, and I'm looking forward for some questions to discuss some detail regarding bioinputs. Thank you very much, Albert.
Thank you so much, Hendrik. I'm sure you could talk so much more and in depth around this topic. You're quite well affair with this topic. Thank you so much for your time. Some of the key takeaways, I think you couldn't have said it much more simpler. Really, really important for us to take away that bioinputs like composting and living mulches really do increase soil health and reduce our dependence on chemical use. Thank you very much. Please allow me to introduce our next speaker, Jesica Monzon. Jesica is a biotechnologist, and she's been a biotechnologist with 15 years of experience in science and technology public policy. Over the past 6 years, she has focused on agricultural bioinputs, and since 2023, she has served as a consultant at FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization Investment Center, contributing to studies on bioinputs in Latin America and the Caribbean region, which are aimed at promoting investment and shaping public policy. So thank you so much. Jesica, over to you and welcome.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation to be part of this webinar. Well, in this presentation, first I will briefly mention the work that FAO has been promoting around bioinputs agenda in Latin America. Then I will focus on the main topic of this talk, that is the current limitations of regulatory frameworks in the region. And at the end, I will share some recent regulatory advances, a brief summary, and some recommendations. In recent years, FAO has promoted several studies on bioinputs, especially from the FAO Investment Center. This center supports countries in shaping sustainable agri-food investment, working with partners like the World Bank, the IFAD, ADMB, and the European Union. And the first study on bioinputs, which has already been published, analyzes the supply and the demand for bioinputs in the region, the role of the public sector, and assesses the potential impact of investment in this field. You can access this document using the QR display here. And then there are other studies which are focuses on cost-benefits analysis or targeted at national or subnational levels. And we also been collaborating with a regional bioinputs network. Now, yes, moving to the core of this presentation. Currently, there is no universally accepted definition of bioinput. While several countries in Latin America have developed official definitions, others, like Mexico, for example, still lacks formal definitions. And in practice, it has some implications. First, the absence of a clear definition makes it difficult to establish consistent and specific regulatory frameworks for these products. And as a result, bioinputs often end up being regulated under frameworks originally designed for agrochemicals. Also, the differences in regulatory requirements across countries create further barriers to the trade of these products. One of the main barriers to the development of bioinput of the bioinput sector is that in many countries, the registration process still follows a model designed for agrochemicals. And treating the bioinputs in the same way as chemical products has important implications for the sector's development. Here we can see the result of two surveys conducted at the regional level and in Mexico. And in both cases, bioinputs producing companies identified as main obstacles the long registration timelines, the lack of technical expertise between regulatory agencies, the high cost of the required testing, and the absence of a specific regulation for their products. And it is important to take a closer look at this. Regulatory frameworks originally designed for agrochemicals typically divide products into two broad categories, those used for nutrition and those used to control pests and diseases. And this second group, because they represent a greater risk to human health and the environment, are subject to stricter safety requirements for field use. However, biologicals follows a completely different logic. To begin, they perform functions that go beyond just nutrition or pest control, such as, for example, improving tolerance to abiotic stress. And also, a single active agent can serve multiple purposes. For example, one microorganisms may act as both a biofertilizer and a biopesticide. And this is becoming more common since many biological products today fulfill multiple functions, some more than 6, as we can see clearly in these graphs. And all these regulatory limitations promote the proliferation of unregistered or low-quality products. As shown in these survey results, one of the main obstacles to the adoption of bioinput reported by farmers is the poor quality of some products currently available in the market. Another topic that has been gaining increasingly relevance across Latin America is the on-farm production of bioinputs. Currently, about 63% of farmers who use bioinputs produce themselves at least some of the products they use. And this is higher among small farmers. While the most common practice is the production of organic fertilizers and other simple biopreparations, on-farm production is not limited to this type of inputs. In fact, around 42% of farmers who produce bioinputs go further and produce microorganisms for plant nutrition, and between 22 and 44% also produce microorganisms for pest control. And clearly, this category of products represents a higher level of risk than organic fertilizers and other simple biopreparations. A key issue is that proper quality control measures are not always applied during the production. In fact, achieving a minimum standard of quality can increase production costs by 45% to 66%, as shown in this case study of a soybean farm in Goiás, Brazil. For all these reasons, it is essential to develop regulatory frameworks specifically designed to govern on-farm production of bioinput. And this is an area where most countries in the region still have significant gaps. There have been some recent regulatory advances in the region, including the new frameworks implemented in Argentina since December 2023 and in Brazil since December 2024. The Brazilian new law, according to our research, it is the only regulation in the region so far that has taken steps to regulate on-farm production of bioinputs. And for Argentina new regulation, I would like to highlight that it marks a major milestone for the country. Until this new regulation came into effect, bioinputs were registered under the same regulations as agrochemicals, but there are still some areas for improvement. For example, clarifying procedures for registering multifunctional products and the regulation of on-farm production. Well, in summary, while some countries such as Brazil, Colombia, and Argentina have made progress in developing specific regulatory frameworks for bioinputs, many others in the region still lack regulations for bioinputs registration. As a result, these products are treated similarly to chemical products. The lack of harmonization is one of the main challenges facing the sector. Also, the registration process is still long, complex, and costly, especially for biopesticides. And also, many multifunctional products are only registered as biofertilizers. And all of this promotes the proliferation of low quality or unregistered products on the market, informal trade of on-farm bioinputs, and insufficient level of quality control. Some recommendations to promote investment in the sector include advance in the official definition and specific regulation of bioinputs, develop frameworks suited to how biologicals works, and not like agrochemicals, update guidelines and protocols for proper evaluation of efficacy and safety to promote the availability of safe and effective products, strengthen technical evaluation teams for the registration and simplify procedures, harmonize definitions and regulations across the region, and establish regulatory frameworks to ensure safety and quality in the production and use of on-farm bioinputs. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesica. That was very, very interesting. I think the takeaway that we got from this specific presentation is that when there's a lack of regulations, we are definitely going into a bit of a space where farmers will take matters into their own hands, create products that the efficacy is doubtful, the way of working of these specific products is unsure to them, and that might lead obviously to contaminations and food safety issues in the future. This has been very interesting. Thank you very much, Jesica. We'll open for questions at the end of the session. I have the pleasure next to present Fabio Carlos Pivid from Brazil. He's an agronomist and a seasoned regulatory affairs professional with over 20 years of experience in the pesticide and biopesticide industry. And since 2003 has been acting in different roles focused on regulatory intelligence, federal and state production registration, experimental use permits, mergers and acquisitions, due diligence, inspections, as well as fast-track evaluation strategies. He has a strong background in multinational companies, deep expertise in navigating Brazil's complex regulatory landscape, and we look forward to Fabio giving us insights on the way forward. Thank you, Fabio.
Thank you, Albert. I see my screen.
Fabio, yes, you can maybe just change your display settings and show presenter mode. We can currently see your notes and not just the main presentation.
Just 4 minutes.
No problem. Fantastic. Thank you, Fabio.
And now it's working?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So, good afternoon. Good morning from my colleagues from Southern Hemisphere. I will talk a little bit about the Brazil and Bioinputs registration that we believe that's a success case. I start to show some pictures about what is happening now in Brazil. The treated area with bioinputs in Brazil is reaching 156 million of hectares. And they expected by 2030 more than 9 billion of reais with the bioinputs market. Right? Here, another picture about the number of bioinputs registered as biopesticide in Brazil, 170. And here you saw the number of the companies that have bioinputs in their portfolio, almost 108. And the number of the players, different of the chemicals in the Brazilian market, is increasing year by year. So only like last year, we have 70 new players that enter in the Brazilian markets to register biopesticides. And here to show the number of inoculants, the specific category of biofertilizers that contain alive microorganisms, we're talking about almost 100 products registered as. And why this is happening in Brazil so fast and the number of registrations is so big? Because we have a law that give priority for products with low toxicity for human health and to environment. So if the most of bioinputs are included in this category, yeah. And in 2006, they published the normative instruction number 3, only to register biological agents of control and also microbiological products. So since 2006, we have a clear criteria, what studies and steps for registering this category of products. In 2023, we have a joint ordinance number 1. That means that was legislation prepared by 3 agencies: Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, and Environment Institute, that established the clear procedure of register microbiological products. And what's the change in this step? Now in Brazil, it's possible to register metabolites since April 2023, because in the past, the metabolites from bacteria or fungus, etc., were used to be treated as a chemical. And now if you prove that the metabolite came from bacteria, they will treat it as a microbiological product. And as mentioned by my colleague, we have now a new law that was published in last December that only related to bioinputs, because up to then, all the microbiological products, biological agents of control, etc., used to be treated as agrochemical in the same classification. Now in Brazil, we do not have this anymore. Bioinputs is another legislation, is another classification, not the same classification of pesticides. Now the next step for the law of bioinputs is to establish the procedures and the criteria to evaluate all the kind of products. We do not have it yet, but the Minister of Agriculture now is the regulator, and not more 3 agents as in the past. And the Minister of Agriculture would said to us that they will publish the new decree up to the end of this year for the category of plant protection products, and also for biofertilizers and inoculants. And the others will become in the next year. Okay. In short, summing up, we will have a fast control evaluation for bioinputs that include microbiological, plant extract, and biological agents of control. That means we will have a specific queue for that. And all the petitions that you mentioned, the code, you have a specific code for that, will be prioritized by the agencies. We have a customized regulatory data package for bioinputs, not as you see around the world, that you ask the same studies for chemical. You have a specific list of studies for bioinputs. The legislation was developed not using the chemical pesticide legislation as base. That is to have different here in Brazil. And the timeline for register a bioinput as a plant protection product, if it use the conventional queue, that means that you are registering a new strain and you must to submit all the data package, is take around 70 months. If you decide to go using the organic farming, that means you use the reference specification, that means you use a strain mentioned by the Minister of Agriculture and use the co-formulants linked by them, so you take around 10 months. This is what's happening in Brazil, and that's the reason that you have a lot of registrations in place and the new players coming. And thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Fabio. That is absolutely so inspiring and positive. Thank you so much for that insight and the presentation. There you have it. That legislation that favors bioinputs has been produced and promulgated in Brazil. And now we just have to work on the criteria and procedures and just continue evolving and transitioning towards using bioinputs. Thank you so much. And thank you for those timelines that have been provided as well. We really hope to see what's coming next from Brazil. Thank you so much, Fabio. Allow me to introduce, thanks. Allow me to introduce our next speaker, Debbie Matuichi from SABO. And Debbie will be talking about the challenges relating to the development and use of bioinputs. Debbie is the chairperson of the South African Bioproducts Organization, SABO. SABO is a non-profit, independent organization which is run by its members and includes all stakeholders within the bioinput value chain: students, researchers, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, consultants, trialists, growers and grower associations. SABO focuses on promoting the use of biological industry through supporting improved regulatory frameworks and compliance. They also provide independent, non-biased training and guidance. They promote the adoption of bioproducts within a sustainable integrated pest management program. And SABO serves as a platform for stakeholder engagement. Thank you, Debbie. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Screen. Great. So as was mentioned, I'm representing SABO and just talking about the South African perspective on some of the challenges that we are faced with using bioinputs. Many of the topics that I'm going to talk about seem to be carried across various regions, but I'll talk about it more in a South African context. So in South Africa, our legal framework, which talks to bioproducts, is associated with two laws. The first being Act 36 of 1947, which defines an agricultural remedy as a chemical substance, or there we go, a biological remedy that specifically is for destruction, control, repelling, attraction, or prevention of any undesired pest. And that then covers any product that is of plant extract, microorganism, macroorganism, semiochemical, or bioinoculant based. Those products then go through that particular regulatory framework, and they are given an L number. Then our regulations relating to fertilizers of 2017 define a fertilizer as being a substance intended or offered to improve or maintain the growth of plants or productivity of the soil. And that is then further divided into three groups, the third of which is related to microorganisms, where it talks to being able to have natural products or organisms that maintain, improve the growth or yield of plants as well as the physical, chemical, or biological condition of the soil. So that then covers both biostimulants and biofertilizers, and those are evaluated and get an M number. The challenge, of course, comes in with there are many microorganisms and plant extracts, which then can fall into both categories. So we have a number of challenges with our regulatory frameworks. One of the good things that has happened recently is we've had a new regulation regarding agricultural remedies. Oopsie, that date is incorrect. It should be August 2023. And from that date, it allowed for the fast tracking of any low risk agricultural remedy. And there are 4 criteria that apply to most biological products, which will allow that fast tracking. However, we have yet to see those kind of turnaround times happening. And so I'm encouraged by the Brazilian example that perhaps that will come in due course. Just quickly about integrated pest management programs versus organic farming in South Africa. We have seen a downward trend of organic farming in South Africa and a bigger focus on integrated pest management. And this is largely because organic farming typically has higher input costs and associated with lower yield. And the demand for these particular products due to their price margins has stagnated. So it's become more of a niche sector in South Africa, versus IPM is now being adopted by more and more growers, and specifically our mega farmers, because it's a much smaller adjustment from your conventional farming practices. South Africa, being a big exporter to the EU, and other trade partners have various phytosanitary pests, but low residue requirements. So in order to make sure that those pests are controlled, it is reliant still on a large amount of synthetic chemistry. Just looking at some of the positive drivers of the bioproduct industry in South Africa, specifically to South Africa, is that our local regulatory authority has banned the use of products that are called CMRs, and those are products of GHS category 1, carcinogenicity, mutagenicity, or reproductive toxicity hazards. They've also said that highly hazardous pesticides must be phased out by 2035. So that leaves large gaps within the control sectors, and those are then great drivers for various biological remedies to fill because there are less new novel synthetic chemical active ingredients coming to the market. Also then from our key trade partners, we're having various chemicals being banned, as well as a demand for lower chemical residues and more sustainable more sustainable farming. Biologicals also represents an alternative mode of action, which is good for our resistance management programs. And with South Africa's climatic conditions, we typically have a very water scarce environment, as well as poor soil health, which can be assisted by biologicals, which can reduce the need for sprays, as well as improve the natural biodiversity of our soils. The biological industry in South Africa can be considered quite young. There are a growing list of competitors, but at this stage, there's very few different alternatives and active ingredients. So there's good profit margins, and so it's extremely attractive. However, we do have quite a number of barriers for our registration and production of bioproducts in South Africa. So we currently have a backlog of about 3 to 5 years before evaluation. We don't have a separate queue for our synthetics and biologicals. So even though we have the fast tracking, there is going to be a delay before all of those products that were in the system already are evaluated. And although they may be evaluated quicker, we are having a large number of rejections, and that is linked to the lack of knowledge within our regulatory and product development sectors. The data requirements are very similar to synthetic chemicals, which makes it expensive for our local startup companies because we don't have sufficient laboratories locally that are accredited to be able to conduct those studies at a reasonable price. Our local regulatory requirements are also not aligned with international requirements and not specific or enough to the different types of biological remedies. We also have a lack of knowledge with our crop advisors and our growers, which is leading to poor product performance. But at the same time, we have our public expecting us to move away from pesticides, which makes a big challenge because they don't understand the need for synthetic pesticides in certain situations. South Africa is also an extremely challenging environment for biological products because of our increasing temperatures and low rainfall conditions and extremely high pest pressure. I just want to expand on two of the points that I've listed here, being the non-compliance and the growers' reluctance to adopt. We have a high amount of non-compliance within our bioproduct industry at the moment. And this has been cited due to various regulatory loopholes about where a product can be registered and where it doesn't need to be. The high cost for data generation, which makes our local players avoid registration. And then also just our inspectorate is inundated with hazardous chemical non-compliance. So they will be less likely to focus on low hazard chemical non-compliance. Again, then talking to the lack of knowledge where our growers don't necessarily know what to look for in terms of what a registered byproduct looks like. And so that's something SABO is working quite hard on to improve. And just in terms of why our growers are reluctant to adopt biological products, this can usually be due to poor experience, and this is potentially from products that are not well researched or regulated. Because of changing weather conditions and how they affect typically biological performance, there's an inconsistency in performance, so therefore a lack of trust, and also insufficient and guidance and a lack of understanding, which will then go hand in hand with that. Also, using biological products, there are more factors to consider and more monitoring required, which is off-putting for a lot of our growers, which are looking for simple solutions. Our local market also requires less need for biological products. So as a result, we have less need to move in that direction. So just with that as a brief discussion of some of the challenges we have in South Africa. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Debbie. Debbie is, as myself and Nitasha, proudly South African, and we are very familiar with the challenges that she faces. I think something noteworthy to take away from Debbie's presentation is the registration timeline in comparison with that of Brazil. There's quite a significant difference if you have a look at what's happening there. Debbie, thank you. We're going to open the floor in a bit for a few questions. I hope there's quite a few. Our final speaker is Theresa Goen. Theresa is a regulatory project officer at the IBMA. She has a background in agronomy, sustainable food systems, and specifically in the EU pesticide policy. IBMA is the International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association, and they represent over 200 members globally, and they promote sustainable crop protection through biocontrol. They work to ensure that access to and the implementation of biocontrol, focusing on proportionate authorization and demonstrating its effectiveness, is adhered to. Theresa, over to you. We look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. So today I'm going to present some few regulatory insights on biocontrol. You very kindly already introduced a bit of IBMA, but just a bit more details. So we represent 200 members globally, mainly biocontrol manufacturers. We have over 10 national groups, so mainly in Europe, as you can see on this map, but also Africa, Kenya. We collaborate with farmer researchers, policymakers, and also other associations like BPIA in the US, who represent the biocontrol sector in the US, and also other international associations like the OECD, CABI, or the FAO. And so our goal is mostly to reach a more fit-for-purpose authorizations of biocontrol, so mostly at EU level, but also to demonstrate biocontrol so that farmers can use it and also policymakers know how it works. So before going a bit more into detail on the regulatory aspects, Just to highlight a bit what we mean by biocontrol, because we've been talking in this webinar about bioinputs, but as in IBMA, we really focus on biocontrol. So if you look at the more global scope of biological products, you have on the other side biostimulants, which are more for plant growth or nutrient assimilation. But in the EU, they fall under a complete different regulatory framework, and we focus more on biocontrol, so which originates from nature and is more focusing on pest and disease control. In IBMA, we consider 4 main groups for biocontrol. So we have the microbials, which are insects, invertebrates, then the microbials, such as viruses, bacteria, fungi. We also have the semiochemicals. The most famous ones are pheromones used for mating disruptions. And then the natural substances, which is a wider group because you have a variety of different substances within this group, such as mineral active substance, plant extracts, botanicals, but also proteins, dead microbe cells. So this is a very diverse group. However, it's important to note that in the European Union, we don't have harmonized definitions, which could be quite complex with regulatory issues. But it should come soon, as mentioned in the recently published EU Vision for Food and Agriculture. So this should be a positive change for us. Now, going in a bit more detail in the regulatory framework for biocontrol in the EU. So as it was mentioned by other speakers in many other parts of the world, so in the EU, it's quite similar. Most biocontrol substances are regulated together with conventional chemical pesticides. However, within this regulation, there's still a specific part for microorganisms. So for microorganisms, it might be a bit less complicated than other substances. And as for macroorganisms, so the insects, there's not a harmonized EU regulation. So each EU member states have their own regulation, which can be quite complex as well. So in the EU, we have a quite unique regulatory framework because we have a separate authorizations for the active substance of the plant protection products, and this is the European Regulation number 1107/2009. And so once the active substance is approved at EU level, then each member states authorize the final formulated plant protection product. And then we have other regulations that are important at EU level, such as the Sustainable Use Regulations, which puts high importance on integrated pest management, and then also the different regulations for pesticide residues, the maximum residue levels. So if we look at the whole approval process from the dossier for biocontrol to EU farmer when it's finally on the market, it's actually so complex that it can take up to 10 years. So first 3 years for the dossier submission with an individual member state, then the approval of the active substance that goes through EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, then the European Commission with other member states, and then the authorization of the final product, the formulated product at the member state level. So if we look, just a little map to show you how long the timeline can be for registering biocontrol in the EU. It's actually the longest and less efficient in the world. I mean, very complex, and it can take up to 10 years comparing to other timelines. Just heard South Africa complaining about the 5 years, but in the EU, I would say it's even longer. Now, just a little comparison with another country, so the US, because we recently issued a paper comparing different regulatory frameworks, including United States and to the EU. But this was more specifically for natural substances. So this doesn't concern all biocontrol, but it's still an interesting overview to have. So looking at the global framework in the EU, as mentioned, we don't have a dedicated regulation or pathway for natural substances, while in the USA, they have a specific regulation for that. Then a lot of studies and requirements in the EU, so efficacy trials are mandatory, while in the US then they are not required federally for natural substances. Residue studies are usually required even for natural substances, often exempt in the US, and the costs can be very high in the EU and way lower in the USA. And then the timelines, of course, quite quick in the US for a natural substance, while in EU it takes a while. And now if you look at this graph, those regulatory frameworks, so they lead to very different biocontrol access in Europe compared to USA. So if you look at biocontrol registration in the USA, especially for natural substances, you can see we have way more available in comparison to the EU. Now I will focus a little more on implication for exporters, because I think this could be of specific interest for SHAFFE members. So a regulation that is quite important for importers is the maximum residue level regulation that I mentioned earlier. So the maximum residue levels are the legal upper limits of pesticide residues allowed in our food in the EU. And they also apply to imported food as import tolerances. However, the advantage is that biocontrol products, most of the time, they lead to very little to zero residues, so including in integrated pest management programs. And so this offers the advantage of higher price markets for residue-free food. Here, I'm going to talk about concrete examples of one of her members, Certis Belgium, who is offering some integrated pest management programs. So programs where you can use a tiny bit of chemicals with a lot more biocontrol. And they showed an example for mandarins where they reach 100% residue reduction and also an increase of 31% of profit for the growers. So quite an interesting example. Now I'm going to finish with a specific case study, so showing how IBMA is also involved in improving import and export rules. So recently we've been working with our members, but also other stakeholders on the organic regulations. So the problem we were facing is that a lot of biocontrol solutions used in third countries, so outside Europe, especially microorganisms, were not authorized in organic farming in the EU. So farmers could not use it for organic farming. So discussing with DG Agri, we actually achieved an approval of all these microorganisms for use in organic farming. So this was quite a win for us and also for biocontrol in third countries. And the organic legislation was recently updated with these changes. So that would be it for my presentation. I hope you liked it, and don't hesitate if you have any questions, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much for that. That was really quite insightful. Again, quite positive and quite inspiring as well, and the difference that your organization is making to get the bioapproval control approval for all the microorganisms. So well done in that regard. Thank you for showing us the timelines between the different countries. That is really staggering, and it is quite overwhelming to see the different varying timelines for the same processes in the different countries. So thank you so much for that. And over to you, Albert, for the final remarks and the Q&A session. Thanks.
Thank you, Nitasha, and thank you to all our speakers. This has been tremendously interesting to hear the experiences across the board. I think we have a few minutes for questions. I have a few, but I will open the floor to the participants online. Do we have any questions for our speakers? Yes, Christo.
Yes, Albert, thank you. It is actually quite informative. Sorry, I joined about 10 minutes late, and I see the presentation is not going to be available, but it will be quite useful for us in South Africa. According to Debbie's presentation, she actually summed it very well up. that how much we battle to register products, because there are several products that we can register that is very effective and have been proven to be used on the local product, but it's just near impossible to get it registered in South Africa. Debbie, I think you will agree with me. And the timeline that Teresa giving in South Africa, I think South Africa timeline and your timeline is more or less the same. But yeah, we're sitting with products that can help the industry on the phytosanitary part, but to jump through all the loops and the cost of that is near impossible. So it's not presentations, but I would rather like that we go to solutions. How are we going to get these products registered and be used for a farmer to start using it? Because there is farmers using it already and with great success. But we are totally limited by legislation via South Africa, via UA, and by the sounds of the presentation, that look, Brazil is going to win the game.
Thank you, Christy. Debbie, do you have a quick answer to Christy's concern? And then we will move over to our next question.
Yes, I think that is one of the reasons fostering non-compliance is that because it's so difficult and the farmers are willing to use it already, many companies don't do it. But I think there's a lot of legal implications if one doesn't register it. So I would like to err on the side of compliance rather. Is one of the priorities of SARBO is to relook at our registration guidelines to be able to address some of these concerns, and especially to reduce the requirements where it's not necessary. So we look quite closely to global regulations, but then in consideration that we are a third world country with limited capacity in some regards. So trying to find that balance. So I would suggest that you form part of SARBO so that you can assist where we are trying to fine-tune these guidelines. Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie. Fumalani, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Albert, and thank you to all presenters. I think the presentations were quite informative. My question is for Fabio. You indicated, I think, in Brazil that over 100 million hectares have actually, the adoption has been actually observed in over 100 million hectares. What's driving that level of adoption? I think it's quite high if I compare to Debbie's presentation on the South African side. Thanks.
Okay, but first, the adoption for the farmers is big. That's the reason. And the 156 million of hectares means, for example, if they apply a bionematicide and later they apply a biofungicide, they count twice. That's the reason that the number is very high. Okay, that is not considered only one application, but is more than some case more than 3 applications in the same area. That's the reason.
Thank you, Fabio. That's a good answer. I have a quick question, and that's aimed at Hendrik. Hendrik, when you start the process of focusing on soil health, is there a specific approach to the process? Is there specific cost implications? And obviously, when do you start expecting results in terms of going the biological route in terms of your soil health?
Thank you, Albert. I think the adaptation process for biological inputs as a whole must come from a philosophical point of view on the farm. Sorry for the tongue tie there. It is a decision that needs to be made in terms of management to change the whole production system to include biological inputs as a start-off point. In terms of soil health, the return on or the results of it, you see quick results in terms of nutrient uptake or chemical fertilizer input efficiency. I would say right from the first year, you see a change of weed suppression right from the first season of making the inputs, but also the long-term benefits. We'll see a reduction of chemical input over a period of time of up to 5 years to really see the difference. But you need to understand, I like to say that every dog has got fleas, but not all dogs have a problem with it. So with it comes a lot of patience to understand that you've got to allow a certain pest pressure to get the full benefit of bioinputs, even if it is registered products or products that are being used unregistered. If you don't have a level of pest or insects or disease that you're targeting, the result seems to be limited and short-lived. From my understanding and experience, 3 to 5 years to see good benefit, and the longer you are willing to stick to it, the bigger the benefit. In terms of cost, initially you have an additional input, even as part of an IPM program. The biocontrol products are generally more expensive, as everybody has stated. But over a longer period of time, as you see the ecosystem adapting, you see a reduction in terms of use of bioproducts as well as the traditional chemical inputs. So it's a long-term investment, costing you a little bit more in the beginning, but over a period of time, it will save you costs in terms of production.
Okay, thanks, Hendrik. That does make a lot of sense. Christo, a quick question before we summarize.
I just quickly want to Hendrik's point is very valid. We started organic citrus producers, and just on a lighter note, I just hope I don't only cause problems here, but I always say you have two organic producers, people that is in there for the money and people that is making it a life of living. And it's two totally different type of producers. And the ones that go in there and do the organic things really properly, I must say, actually, we only start seeing the benefits after 10 years. And today, people, I'm actually mentioning in the industry that in organic and a conventional lemon is not the same product, it's two different products, or oranges or whatever, because once you really start going organic and you have a long-term benefit and you did everything correctly and not taking shortcuts, you definitely see the benefits. And in the beginning, the yield decreased, but over the long term, you will see the benefits of the natural insects coming in. The yield was busy increasing. We're sitting with organic product now that's really something, but unfortunately, it's a very, very small percentage.
Thank you, Christo. I am going to summarize. If there's any other questions, we will be sharing the details and you can ask your questions via email. I think we have a fantastic crowd of speakers with a lot of knowledge that can assist all over the board in terms of concerns and guidance in this process, as this is a fairly new and developing industry. Thank you to all our speakers. You guys were amazing, and thank you for the knowledge that you shared and your willingness to participate and to guide all other role players in this process. I think if I have to give a few takeaways, is that there's definitely a big difference between the countries where there's fast tracking of products, but also where there's two separate frameworks for your synthetics and your biologicals. There's a dedicated, focused process that specifically works towards an output there. And obviously commercially, I think those countries will eventually in the arms race have an advantage when it comes to the amount of products that they register. I think, as mentioned by Jesica as well, is there's really a need for harmonized definitions and frameworks between countries to eventually ease registrations all across the board, specifically for us out of the Southern Hemisphere that goes into our EU and North American markets, to make sure that we are aligned and that we don't run in separate directions. And it's very important. My third takeaway is obviously that if there's loopholes in the specific frameworks that the countries pose in terms of the registrations that of these products, that we will most likely see lower quality products into the markets that's not that efficient. And as mentioned, obviously there's farmer inputs involved as well in this process that's unregulated. And that's at the end of the day really just going to hurt the word bioinputs or biofertilizers, biopesticides at the end of the day. So then that's going to hinder the uptake of these methods, IPM, soil health, all these type of things. Thank you once again for your time. We will be sharing the information. That's the last of my voice. I'm going to hand over to Nitasha to close the webinar for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Albert. I would just like to say that the recording will be available on the SHAFFE website. I have put Ellen Pay's email address in the chat. If you have any questions or you need more information or you want to contact the speakers, please email secretariat@shaffe.net and you will get all the assistance you need. Thank you again for everyone who's joined us. And the next webinar will be on the 17th of June on packaging regulations. It is organized by the Working Group on Market Access, and it just provides an overview as to how our countries can actually comply with regulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.